lead us in the pledge and the moment of silence?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Seems to be my new job.
Good afternoon. Call this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education to order. We do have a quorum present. And at this time, I ask Vice President Stauffer to lead us in the pledge and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
At this time, I ask for approval of our agenda for this afternoon.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. All those in favor of the agenda approval, please raise your right hand.
Don't forget to pour in my way.
Yes? Okay. We've got 6-0 with the student member concurring. And at this time, approval of the minutes.
I move we accept the approval of the minutes. I don't have the date on that, I'm sorry.
June 20th. The orange sheet there.
The orange sheet, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I didn't see it.
Approval of the closed session minutes dated June 20th, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Any discussion, additions, corrections to those minutes? All those in approving those? We have 2 abstentions, 2, 3, 4, 4 ayes and 2 abstentions. And thank you.
I also go to make a motion to approval of the business minutes dated Tuesday, June 20th, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any additions, corrections, discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving those minutes? 4 ayes. Student member concurs. And 2 abstentions. Okay. At this time, we would have public comment. If we had anyone signed up, we have no one signed up. Is there anyone out there in the audience this afternoon that would like to come forward to address the board at this time during this public comment portion of our meeting? No? Thank you. We'll move on to old business. The first item on the agenda is a consent agenda coming from the Policy Committee. Mr. Trotta, good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. During the Board of Education's public business meeting conducted on June 20th, a comprehensive report was provided with regard to the proposed policies, fundraising policies that would apply to school-based organizations, incorporated organizations, and unincorporated organizations. During the meeting, the Board of Education approved the first reading of 3 policies and the exhibits that accompany those policies, and the rescission of 2 existing policies on this subject. Since the first reading, the community has been provided an opportunity to offer comments. No comments have been received. The Policy Committee is requesting the Board of Education to approve the second reading of Policy JJE and Exhibit JJE-E, Policy KB and the 4 exhibits to this policy, Policy KBA and the 4 exhibits to this policy, and finally, it's also requesting that existing policies IGDF and JLA be rescinded. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading to rescind policies IGDF and JLA entitled Fundraising and School-Sponsored Activities, and 2, to approve the second reading of proposed policy JJE, School-Based Student Organization Fundraising Activities, and proposed exhibit JJE-E, Activity or Program Approval Form, proposed policy KB, Incorporated Organization Fundraising Activities, and proposed exhibit KBE-1, Activity or Program Approval Form, proposed exhibit KBE-2, Authorization/Denial of an Incorporated Organization, and proposed exhibit KBE-3, Sample Financial Report, along with proposed exhibit KBE-4, Suggested Agreed Upon Financial Procedures for Incorporated Organizations. Also, there is proposed policy KBA, Unincorporated Organization Fundraising Activities, proposed exhibit KBAE1, Activity or Program Approval Form, proposed exhibit KBE2, Authorization/Denial of an Unincorporated Organization, with proposed exhibit KBE3, Sample Financial Report, and proposed exhibit KBAE4, Suggested Agreed Upon Financial Procedures for Unincorporated Organizations.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Deep breath. Is there a second to Mrs. Fisher's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guessford. Mrs. Fisher, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think we have talked about this a lot and enough. Hopefully, this will, once everyone gets used to it, I think it will help to streamline procedures for arranging for fundraising activities at various schools. Hopefully, it will also cover, I hate to talk about this, but the illegal kinds of activities that kind of spurred this event anyway at one of our schools with a PTA. I think there's a lot of safeguards built in here, not just for those organizations and the people who spend hours and hours of their time working for the schools, but for our students as well, who were sometimes put in peril when they were doing various fundraising activities. So I think it's all in all a very worthwhile set of policies.
Anyone else? Mr. Trotta, before we vote, could you, and I apologize for putting you on the spot like this and not warning you that I was going to ask this, could you tell us how the organizations and the principals are going to be made aware of these new requirements and changes to current practice?
Certainly.
Just take a minute to do that.
First of all, the policy committee will be meeting on July 13th, and one of the items that's on the agenda is the schedule going forward, assuming that the board takes action today to approve these policies. What we will be doing is working directly with school staff. There will be written communications. Additionally, the school principals have periodic meetings. We will ask to be placed on that agenda to fully brief them prior to the commencement of the school year on this matter. And we will also be following up with the many organizations that we've already written to and are aware of the action taken by the board. We have provided the board with an extensive list of the various PTAs and other organizations, boosters organizations, that will have to follow these new policies and procedures. And we want to thank Dr. Akers and Mr. Sembler for gathering that information for us and providing that contact information for us for each of these organizations. So we will be following up with them in writing. We'll seek further direction from the policy committee as to whether they like to see some additional action, and certainly the superintendent to see if he has any recommendations going forward to make sure that the community is fully aware of these new requirements.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of Mrs. Fisher's motion, please raise your right hand. 6, and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Mr. Bechtel, you're next on our agenda, the consent agenda.
Mrs. Williams, I'm going to ask that Mr. Bechtel just read roughly what the items are today. I know Mr. Bickford mentioned to me, and I mentioned to talk to Mr. Bechtel and failed to do so. He kind of reads down through that whole list and company and price, and then one of the board members turns around and repeats that whole thing. So we'll probably try to avoid almost what we have with some of the first and second reads. He'll just kind of give a brief overview and then make himself available for questions. And that way, when we read someone reads the motion, they can mention all the details, and that way it'll be entered in for the record.
Okay.
Short and sweet. So good afternoon. So like Dr. Michael said, today we have 5 items for your review, the details of which were included in your packets. The Purchasing Review Committee met on June 29th and to review all of these items and is recommending approval. So staff is available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. Is there a motion?
I can read it if you
All
want
right.
me
Go ahead.
to. Madam President, to approve the awards, renewals, and procurement for local fresh produce to Greenberg's Farm, Wholesale Produce Company, and Reinhardt Orchards Incorporated per the attached price sheets, Exhibit 1, building automation, energy management, and automated temperature control, annual maintenance extension to Control Systems Incorporated at a total of $228,500. Security camera systems and service to Atlantic Security Systems Incorporated per the attached price list. Library media content management software to Library Video Company at a total of $76,060. And library management system software to, I guess that's Follett, at a total of $51,052.50.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Questions for Mr. Bechtel or any discussion? Nothing? All right, then we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of Mr. Stauffer's motion, please raise your right hand. 6-0. Student member, you abstain? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is consideration of the schematic design for Sharpsburg Elementary School. Mr. Rollins, Mr. Criswell, and Mr. Ilkovich.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. We're here today with Ron Ilkovich of Smolin Emer Ilkovich Architects Incorporated to present the schematic designs. We've previously met with staff here last month. I've had meetings with the former principal, Sharpsburg Elementary, and the current principal, Mr. Allshouse. On June 28th, we presented this information to the Advisory School Design Review Committee with Washington County, and a copy of that correspondence from them to the board is included in your packet. We're going to allow Mr. Ilkovich here to go through the current status and process and how we arrived at this point.
Thank you all for having us back to present our progress. Sharpsburg Elementary School schematic design. Just quickly start with the existing aerial. We can see here the existing school along with the 2 adjacent properties. I'm going to use this little arrow here that were added to the existing site to expand the school onto the within its own property and site plan. Looking at the adjacencies and the context of the town of Sharpsburg, we have, of course, the Civil War historic background of the region, as well as a context of the urban plan that has a small residential scale buildings that create the street front through the town of Sharpsburg. So taking that more deeply into our site plan, surrounding our entire area is the property line, and we have a building setback requirement per the local zoning accord, which is 150 feet at the street, 100 feet side yard, and a 50-yard rear yard setback. And this, of course, limits the area in which our building is permitted to reside. So that's another wrinkle in the process, if you will. Moving to the site itself, we have a topographic change where we drop about 16 feet in the site, and you can see here on the existing stone retaining wall how that property drops 15 feet between the current property of what is the school and the new property that's since been acquired. This also offers the opportunity for some great views that hopefully our project can take advantage of as we design. And the existing building also has some historic context that we maybe can be able to bring over into our new project moving forward. So how do we address our building, our new program onto this existing site? So here we have the proposed site plan, and the first step to this is how do we site the building? So our approach here was to site the building in such a way where it didn't overmass or overpower the scale of the town. We have a building that is bigger than anything else that exists in the town of Sharpsburg, so we have to be very respectful of how big this building feels. So our approach here, if you look at the diagram at the bottom, was to enter on the high side of the building and then drop the building down into the lower bowl of the site, taking advantage of that topographic change. The next step in the siting of the building is safety and security. So we were very careful to separate the bus loop, parent drop-off, and pedestrian pathways. We learned from the school committee and the principal that pedestrians will be coming down this direction, so you'll see that they don't cross traffic once they get on site. School bus circulation never crosses parent or parking circulation, and parent drop-off has plenty of stacking to drop all at the front door without ever crossing traffic patterns. So there's a definite goal of the safety of the circulation on the school site. The other component is main entry. So we're walking the line of not overpowering town, but still making sure that from Shepherdstown Road or Main Street, you do see where the front entrance is, so it's very obvious and clear, and that the admin is located in a location where they have the opportunity to surveil the entire site and circulation pattern as those activities are occurring. Moving into the building, we can see how that admin component and the reception will have that opportunity to surveil. Front entry will be controlled by an entry vestibule, so all visitors will have to sign in at the front office prior to gaining access to the school. The building is essentially planned around a courtyard with a loop circulation pattern of corridors that goes the entire way around the building, and is really separated with public on the north side and private, quieter activities on the south side. Moving downstairs, we can see how that public side of the building includes the cafeteria, gymnasium, music, and resource center, instructional resource center, and with the instructional areas kind of separated and private. The instructional areas are arranged with 3 classrooms per grade level, each arranged around a collaborative learning area and a toilet grouping. This was a plan that really kind of came together with the committee and committee input, where the challenge here really was how do we arrange 3 full classrooms around a single collaborative learning area that they can all share and have equal access to. So we kind of worked this out with that committee. We also worked out the idea of where the primary levels would be on the lower level with direct access to the cafeteria and gymnasium, where they will move back and forth more often between. So those were all inputs in the way that the plan really came, the process by which the plan really came about to be. This table really explains how we moved from the educational specification component of this process into the schematic design. On the left of the column is the EdSpec net square footage for each space, and really the goal, the primary goal of the schematic design process is to assign every space have the appropriate area and proportion of that space, and have the appropriate adjacencies between the spaces. So what this table really demonstrates is that when we started with the goal of a maximum area of 59,818, which is predicated by the IAC's funding formula, we had an ed spec that was derived from that number, and then by increasing the efficiency of the design beyond the 70% minimum standard, we were able to actually achieve a little bit more program than the ed spec. So we had a series of wish list items during the ed spec process. Those included individual toilets in all of the classroom pods. They included toilets in the specials programs, the art, the music, the media center. And there was also the idea of having a separate production studio in the IRC, in addition to the combination studio and storage area. So because of that kind of efficiency and that effort, and by also saving 2 toilet rooms per cluster as opposed to 3, we were able to achieve all those other simultaneous goals. So we feel that there was some value added into the program through the concept. So once we had the concept and schematic design, we were able to start exploring some ideas for how the building would actually look and come together. Going back to our idea of minimizing the massing from Main Street, we wanted to maintain that obvious front entrance, but still not overwhelm. But the idea that we're dealing with elementary school students, so having a very large building that they're coming up to is a scale issue. And then also trying to get a situation where we could screen some of our high volume spaces. So the cafeteria, the gymnasium, those really large volumes could be screened behind some of these masonry walls. And the masonry could start to reintroduce the ideas of the stone walls that already exist on the site, some of the historic context of the project. We're also very much inspired by local vernacular, where there are smaller buildings at the street front and larger barn-style buildings behind those. So we started to play with some ideas that will continue to evolve now into the design development phase with how that might be articulated on the building. Also working within the building, dealing with that grade change elevation and the adjacency requirement of the learning studio to the IRC. How do we start to make and take advantage of that grade change, develop an IRC that has the opportunity for different group sizes, full classroom sizes, individual learning, small group, while still really articulating and making that an exciting space that students want to go and do their projects and work in. We started to develop an IRC plan that will continue to evolve into the design development phase, really trying to understand how that will get used and who will use it. At the end of the day, we always track our projects, both schedule and cost controls, and here we have our current estimate of construction cost, which is within the project budget, and we are progressing on schedule as intended at this time. I know that's a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, I approve make a motion to approve the schematic design documents as prepared by SEI Architects of Sharpsburg for Sharpsburg Elementary School, including the acceptance of comments from the Advisory School Design Review Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Discussion? Questions?
I have a question. I'm new to school construction, having only been on the board about 6 months, but what is the life expectancy of what you refer to as cement plank? I mean, does it deteriorate through the years, and how do you restore it if it does that to its original look? I mean,
So we're still in the exploratory process, but our intent is that we're going to have a cement plank or like material that'll last similar to a masonry. It's not a vinyl or paper product at all. So it's much more of a durable product. So I'd say 30 years life expectancy on that material.
I mean, it's cement, so how's it come and put up? I mean,
It's in planks or panels. So if you're familiar with a hardy plank, for example, that's it's a substitute for a wood siding that's not made of wood, so it won't rot. These products, on the other hand, in addition to that, are made of cement, essentially. So Where we might not be able to afford a full masonry construction project, we can get the durability of masonry without the cost associated with it, is the intent of the cement plank.
We've used a similar product at Jonathan Hager on the upper levels. But we're still, as he said, exploring the all the different envelope types and determining
when I first
what
looked-
material we can afford.
Looked at some of the pictures, I thought, that can't be wood.
It's not.
And then, I mean, you know,
It
The
won't be
cementitious
wood.
panel is actually, it's a little bit thicker than a drywall panel. It's definitely a lot stronger. It's got more strength to it. When we first got it for Jonathan Hager, I soaked it in a trash can full of water for a week and a half and pulled it out to make sure it wasn't going to do anything. It wasn't going to bulge or anything like that. And it passed that test. So I figured if it could stay underwater for a week and a half, it was worth considering and using up high where people couldn't access it.
I mean, quite honestly, when I first looked at the pictures, I wasn't impressed with the design, but I understand trying to fit into the nature of Antietam Battlefield and the historic areas of Sharpsburg and so forth. But it's a different looking school than we're used to looking at.
Mrs. Fisher?
I understand trying to capture the sort of appearance of the town, and you said with like the homes or buildings in front and the barns behind. But I don't think you find very many homes in Sharpsburg made with those two-tone blue and green that looks like glass or something panels. And quite frankly, I think this is the ugliest building I've ever seen in my life. I have a much bigger concern, though, and that is with the IRC. I was one of the people who protested against making the two-story library in Jonathan Hager. And as it turned out, it's kind of a waste because unless you have a second person in the library, you can't use both levels at the same time because you have to have somebody being able to observe the children at both levels. I am extremely concerned over the steps in this thing. I can see the kids standing there talking, not paying attention, stepping back. I'm talking about the big wide steps. Stepping back and falling down those steps. The side steps, I see no railings whatsoever, which I think is illegal or something to begin with. So I have major concerns about this building. I really do.
We appreciate that input, and those are things that we are looking at. We were at a schematic design phase when we turned over. We're looking at ways that that top area may, whether it be a half wall or other things that are opportunities for actually to make that space even more usable than we demonstrated today. So our intent is to meet with staff further, continue to develop how that space is going to be used, and continue to refine the design appropriately. I anticipate that we'll continue to do the same with the elevations as well. I suppose we push a boundary and then we pull back to see where the right sweet spot is for this project, but we will not leave it until you're happy with it, I promise.
Mr. Stauffer?
What is the, because I read it in the booklet that came along, it doesn't really tell me what its use will be. The Learn Studio, what?
So a learning studio is where a class can go from their classroom to the learning studio where they can do activities that they may not be able to do in their classroom. So whether it's a WED activity or a project activity, so it's for project-based learning that can't really be accommodated within the classroom. So there may be technology or tools there that they wouldn't have in every classroom.
Because under specialized instructional programs, I looked and it didn't really state the purpose of it. I just wondered, what's the itinerant area? I saw that on the thing.
Itinerant areas are for whether it's people who are established in the school or come to the school. It's an office or workspace for them, and they provide all sorts of support programs for the students.
Itinerant teacher and so forth.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. It just said itinerant, and I thought maybe that was something special in the new buildings.
What we found is principals will be pretty creative of how they use that space. It might turn into, small instructional space for, an intervention type program, or for itinerant staff that we hire, or itinerant staff that might come from a service organization to support students. So we've been very successful adding those in other schools. They've had good use. I think for the Learning Center, I think other places we may have called it makerspace. It's kind of the current buzzword, but a place where students can go and create all types of things. So that's the nature of that area, I think is what that's for.
That square footage used to cover a computer lab in the schools, which since we're distributing the computers throughout the schools now, we don't need a computer lab reserved just for that purpose. So we're repurposing that square footage into this makerspace learning lab kind of thing.
Anyone else?
I have a few questions. First of all, I love the design.
Great.
Yeah, it's very nice. I appreciate the working into the historical buildings to make it kind of fit into Sharpsburg. Sharpsburg is probably the most historical place that we have in Washington County, in my opinion. And I know it's hard to design something and keep everybody happy. But I love the barn, and I think it does wonders that it's in the back. Not that it's, but it does kind of fit that design of a farmhouse and the, the learning of the school out front, and then, the outbuildings. That being said, the teachers on the board here have a lot of issues with inside, and I'm not a teacher, so I'm just going to yield to their knowledge of that. I have some concern with the cafeteria and the kitchen. Have we thought about if trucks come in there, how we get those in there? It doesn't look like a very large area for a small tractor trailer to back up. I'm just throwing these things out that you would, think about.
Yep.
I don't see any trash dumpster area. And I would hope that wouldn't be on the front end of that where the cafeteria is, because typically where your cafeteria is where the dumpster goes because you got the food. And that would be in the front of the school area. And I don't think that's something we would want to see, because eventually I think the one property, if you're looking at the top of the properties next to the old existing, to the right of that, the first property is still not ours. The second one is ours. Am I correct with that, Rob? Do we own that second property?
We own the property that we outlined in the presentation.
Okay, so we don't have any other properties there?
On the street, no.
Okay.
Right.
So if those eventually, that would be, something that you would be thinking of, those views that were coming there, you wouldn't want to see a dumpster to that side. To me, that's a backyard, and I'm looking at that, and that is a clear view from the street into that. Now, I know that's probably only, maybe 20, 25 foot wide. It may be a little bit more than that, but, if you're going by there, you wouldn't want to see a dumpster there. And since the cafe is there, that's where I think that you would probably put the dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that needs to be thought about a little bit.
Okay.
Is there going to be any type of, and I'm not sure, but for traffic flow from Shepherdstown Pike in and out, is there going to be any light, any changes there for the traffic flow into that?
There's no plans for a traffic light at this point.
Okay. Do you think that we would eventually see that?
Probably not. The county said based on the traffic flows and the occupant load of the building that they probably wouldn't need it.
Because I know originally they kind of thought of coming off that lower level down there beside of the church, using that as an exit. Is that, and that kind of has been blocked off there, I think, because of the ball fields that are down there. So is that now not something that we are anticipating?
At this point, we're not anticipating it.
If we would happen to want to change that down the road 20 years, are we blocking ourselves off that we can't do that?
I think there's a way to wind a road around there if we wanted to do that.
Okay, that's a pretty steep area in there. I understand that. That's for sure. I've walked that property. Okay. So for right now, I think that's the two things that I have really mostly is the dumpster area. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Murray?
Question. We build two-story buildings, and we have an elevator.
Mhm.
I do we evacuate special needs students when there's a fire drill? Do they use the elevator and, I mean,
No, our staff's
Can't use-
trained. We have an evac chair. It's actually, we have one at the top of the third floor mounted to the wall. It's an evac chair that we use to, and we've trained staff into schools to help children get down. It's almost like something between a wheelchair and a stretcher. But
The
you
life
could
safety
easily-
codes require the stairwells to be rated for 2 hours, so that the fire, if there was one, couldn't get into that space for 2 hours. We also build platforms at the top of the stairs, so you can move a needs child right to into the stairwell, and they can then wait for help to use the evac chair. They're safe in that area for the 10 minutes maybe they need for someone to come and help them if they need. Also, in this design, it's 2 stories, but each story has an at-grade exit also. So, of course, depending on where the fire was, they might still have to use a stairwell, which we'd be equipped to use. But in the general alarm, both stories can go out at grade, one toward the front in the parking lot and one toward the rear on the lower level. So,
that's good to know.
Question.
May I, before you
Yeah.
take a second shot?
You're the
Is that all right?
president. You're the president. You
Well,
can do what you want.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Mr. Ilkovich, I don't feel as strongly about this as does Mrs. Fisher, and I'm not in love with it as is Mr. Gessert. I'm somewhere in between there. I have some concerns about the aesthetics of it. What I do like looking at the drawing, I like the stone portion. I like that very much. I have some concern about as Mrs. Fisher mentioned, the blue and white, how that kind of fits in with Main Street, Sharpsburg. And I don't know that, while I understand that there are barns in that area where that part of the school will be, I don't know that I like the idea of a school looking like a barn. So I appreciated your remarks where you said you kind of push the envelope and then pull back. So that said, looking at this that we received in our packet, which is page 5, that shows the Sharpsburg school sign, is there any way that this could be in some way incorporated
Yes.
in
That's the
the
intent.
frontage of this school?
Yes.
In particular, I think, and again, going back to Mr. Gessert's remarks about the historic importance of Sharpsburg, that
The pediment.
yeah, it just strikes me as being very modern and very stark, and facing that, out on Main Street is a concern. I would like to see more something in keeping with downtown Sharpsburg than that.
Just so you know, staff has raised all these concerns too.
Have they?
We have some of the same issues, and so, but what we've tried to focus on in schematics
Right.
is not so much the envelope, but the general layout and the
Right.
massing of the building. Does
Right.
this work from a flow, students through the building?
Yes.
We can work on the outside
On
to
the
make
outside.
it look like everybody wants it to look.
Right.
So
And-
we're
and
not
I-
locked into any of that.
Right, and I think that's our first, that's
Right.
where we go to first,
Sure.
is that, boom. Looking at the interior of the building, I too have some concern about the multi-levels of what's being called the Learning Studio in the IRC. And I would hope that you would get a lot of input
Right.
from the instruction side of the house with regard to how that will work for our students.
There's still ongoing discussions about that feature.
Okay.
And it may end up in, it may not. So it might be converted to some other use. Whatever we do, it's going to be safe. There's going to be railings wherever we need railings.
Right.
Please
Well, and
be assured of that.
accessibility,
Exactly.
for
Yes.
ease
Mhm.
of access in that, with regard to those multi-levels. So those are my comments. Mr. Stauffer, back to you.
I'm just curious as to, again, on the outside, what brainstorming is being done about the site of the old school once it's torn down to.
So we're looking at a number of options. We'd like to, first of all, retain the stone wall that helps to continue the street edge along the front. Some opportunities might be a rain garden, something that we can incorporate into our stormwater management and the instructional program, and also be something very attractive that the town can appreciate as well in that area of the site. And perhaps something that even examines the original borders of the original historic footprint of the school, which you don't really see anymore. And maybe if that garden can somehow reiterate that footprint for the town, we think that could be a nice feature out front.
I have something else.
Mr. Gessert?
On the schematic page, it kind of looks like this one here. I'm looking here at the classrooms, and let's just take, for instance, CR.1, CR.2.2, and CR2.3. It's the bottom left corner of that page.
What page you on?
Page 35.
Thank you.
There's 3 classrooms, and to me, I mean, although there is an exit to the left of that we may be able to get young students out, I look at the next corridor down where it's CR 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and then across the hall, there's 6 classrooms coming out at one area to try to get everybody out if there is an emergency. That seems to me like there would be a bottleneck of kids trying, especially in the small corridor of, say, CR3 going into the area where CR 3.1 and 3.3, everyone's coming out into a little tiny area, and you're trying to get them out in an emergency. So to me, it's just trying to get those students out. How do we get, if there's 20, is there 20 kids in each of those classes just by design?
20 plus.
So you're talking 60 kids on each side, trying to get them out of that little area. So you're 120 kids coming out if those classrooms are full. No, 120 kids coming out of that little area.
So in the diagram, 3.1 and 4.3, we've added a second means of egress to alleviate that. In 3.1 and 4.3. Classroom 3.1 and 4.3.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The opposite corners have a second means of egress
Second door.
to alleviate some of that congestion.
Okay, for
That's only
3,
one room.
but that's one room. So that gives you one room and one room there. So you're still got 80 students coming out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically, you do still have. Say you have that art class going on, and you have CR2 classroom full going on, and then all those other kids. That's a small area to try. To me, I've never been in there where they have a fire drill, but just to me, logically speaking, that's a lot of kids to try to get out of that little hallway. Now that may be a 20-foot hallway. I don't know. But I don't think so.
So it's a good point. So what we're dealing with here is a difference between what the code will permit with allowable egress width requirement versus, as you say, a logical location of where the door should be so that we don't increase congestion in that corridor. So I think we should go ahead and look at door locations and where they cross corridor to each other to maybe improve that just circulation pattern.
Yeah, I could see possibly doing something on the back end into the courtyard to get out, but then you still have.
Then you're trapped.
You're kind of trapped there. But if you had something that, I don't know how to, the INTST, what is that?
Instructional storage. I think.
Storage area. If there's some way that they could get out through there, you could at least get the back end of those CR 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 out that direction, and then these classrooms on the outside building could come forward and out. I just think that's really and I won't say a poor design. I just don't think that maybe we thought that went through. But there's teachers here that could probably. You're an elementary teacher. You know what those ages are. You help me out here.
I wasn't an elementary teacher, I was high school, but if you look at each of the clusters for the grade levels, why couldn't a door be put in the back of CR 2.2, in the back of CR 4.2, in the back of CR 5.2.
So we're limiting exterior doors for security
For
reasons.
security, I understand
Yeah.
that.
So
But
rest assured, we're going to keep looking at door locations and all the circulation. And the first thing we have to do is meet the life safety code that the fire marshal imposes. So those things are all included as we study the design. And if we feel like we need to go beyond that, we will.
I mean, the fire code people are very strict.
Right.
They have distance, measure the volume of students coming out, how far it is from one entrance. Once dead-end corridor exceeds a certain length, you got to do something else. I mean, they have a lot of this researched and well thought out, and they review these plans multiple times and even reserve the right, even on opening day, to come in and make changes, and they have. So we'll be absolutely certain that we comply with that, because otherwise we can't receive an occupancy permit. So.
And it can't be any worse than in a high school where you've got classrooms entering out into one hallway, and you got 6 classrooms, and a fire drill comes up, and you got those classrooms emptying, all going out the same way. I mean,
yeah, but they're teenagers.
they're teenagers. I understand
we're talking,
that. I understand that.
6, 7, 8-year-old kids.
I understand that.
And those teachers are trying to like herd cattle.
School students
You
at
know,
all levels
in
are
a
more
nice way,
disciplined
but-
about exiting in a
Right.
fire than any other population on Earth, I think. They get out of a building in a hurry.
I'd make sure that the teachers
Right.
have some say in
Sure.
that, because they're the ones that've got to get them out. Obviously, if they don't feel safe, then we need to change that. The fire marshal will tell you it's safe, but if the teachers say, this isn't going to work, let's make sure that we make it work for them, because they're the ones that have got to be. The fire marshal's only going to come in there once a year and say, yeah, it looks good. But it's the teacher that needs to be able to say, I can get them safely out of the building. Hopefully we never ever have that, anything like that happen, but we want to make sure that we're prepared. And I just see that as a disaster, waiting to happen. And I'd rather talk about it now than to wait. So.
Okay.
But I also have faith in the staff that they'll work something out, and that'll be resolved.
Absolutely.
It'll
Absolutely.
be the best plan possible, and fire marshal has to look at it too. I mean,
Raising my hand to call on myself.
you may speak.
I'd like to know the reasoning for having art down with this cluster of classrooms as opposed to having it up with what we generally think about as enrichment classes, where up here where music and the IRC. Why have art down there?
So a couple of reasons. We had an opportunity with the Learning Studio and the art room to, number one, take advantage of that high plateau in what we've labeled as the plaza, to have them both open up to a outdoor learning area where they could do projects outdoors. With that high level, because of the topography and that one image on you can see, they're going to have opportunities to view out across the landscape from a very high vantage point, and that might be a nice opportunity for them for their learning and art experience. Also, art likes to face directly north and get direct north light, and that's in this location. The art has that opportunity to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions? Mrs. Fisher?
I was following Mr. Gassford's discussion here about access for students during a fire or something, and it just made me start looking around. I'm looking at the music room. It's on the lower level. It appears to me if you come out of that music room, you've got to come all the way down this hall, all the way up the other hall to get out of this place. I think there ought to be either a way to get into the kitchen and then get to the kitchen outside door, or put a door in that music room.
So here again, the discrepancy between our preference and the actual fire code. So we're allowed a 50-foot what they call a dead-end corridor, so where you can go down and don't have an option to get out. We may want to look at putting a back door out of that music room, but then we're going to compare that in our design development process with staff over whether the security overwhelms the egress. But from an egress capacity and a fire marshal and technical safety component, we're okay. The issue is going to be, what is our preference in that regard?
That's why I suggested you might want to put a door between the music room and the kitchen, and then you're not adding another egress door as far as the outside, but
Or perhaps egress from one music to the other music room and directly to the outside.
There's a stairwell here, too.
There is
there-
a stairwell directly adjacent there that
Yeah.
can bring us up.
The elevator where they could go up and out too.
So even if you took that wall out, it would be around the corner and straight up the steps.
Well, the idea is once you come to the end of that less than
Hallway.
50-foot hallway, you
Right,
have
I
a
didn't-
choice. You can
Yeah.
run to the corridor directly
notice
to the
that.
exterior, or you can go up the rated stair. So there's two means of egress once you hit that 50-foot dead-end corridor demarcation line. But yes, that wall, that nib wall could go away.
Yep.
Might have already done.
And that takes you to the front of the building, actually.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
hadn't
I don't think
noticed.
they'd allow a door going in from music into a kitchen for fire issues.
Probably not. You could exit across the stage. There's a door
Yeah.
there too. Uh,
Any other questions? No? All right, then the motion is to approve the schematic design documents as prepared by SEI Architects for Sharpsburg Elementary School, including acceptance of the comments from the Advisory School Design Review Committee. Would they also include our comments here this afternoon, or do we need to amend this motion to
Would they?
include the comments that you heard here with regard? Okay, that's the understanding. Mrs. Fisher, you look puzzled.
Well, it just seems to me if we approve it, we're approving it.
That's why I asked
that's why-
that's why I asked the question.
I think at this point, you're approving at the schematic level. I think they've already indicated there'll be a variety of changes. I think it'll still look very similar, but it won't look the same when they come back with the DD design. So I think the directions you provided are things they'll go back and consider. I mean, we have to be within code. Those are things you need to double check and be certain of. I think the board's made some comments that they want to have some other options and some things considered. Cost is something that always drives everything. Safety is always going to drive what we're doing. We're not going to create anything unsafe. So I think your approval with comments today are things they'll consider. It's not guaranteed they're going to go back and add all those things because it may
Right.
not be practical.
Right.
And I think it was indicated with the trade-off of security. An outside door doesn't sound like a security issue until somebody on the inside pops that door open and lets it open purposefully for somebody to access the building. The fewer places that we have to worry about securing the building, particularly in a lockdown, makes a huge difference. I mean, in seconds that we've got the building locked down. The more external, I mean, it used to be back in the day, every classroom had an external door, generally went right out to the playground. In our older buildings, we struggle with keeping those doors closed, particularly back in the day before we had air conditioning, things like that. Everything has changed now with security type things. So all those are things they need to weigh. I think the group heard the comments. They'll come back with reasons why. We can re-listen to this tape and be certain that we've listened to each of the comments and at least be able to respond to why we didn't make the change, if indeed you don't, or what changes were accepted by the board.
All right. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approval of the schematic design documents? Yes, 6 ayes, and the student member concurs. Thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Thank you for your
Thank you for
comments.
Thank
Appreciate
you. The next item on the agenda is consideration of standing committee assignments with our newest board member coming on board, Mrs. Murray. I am recommending that we place Mrs. Murray on the Curriculum Instruction Committee and the Facilities Committee and have her serve as chair of Curriculum and Instruction. Is there a motion?
Yes, Ms. Williams, I'd like to make a motion for the board to approve the recommended standing committee assignments.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Discussion? Questions? No? Okay. All those in favor of approving the recommendation that Mrs. Murray be appointed to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee and as chair, and to the Facilities Committee as a member. Please raise your hand. 3, 6. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a donation. Mr. Semler, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. I'm seeking your approval for a gift in the amount of $8,124 from the Clear Spring Elementary PTA to Clear Spring Elementary School. The funds will be used towards the purchase and installation of an around-the-bend climbing wall as an addition to the equipment at the Clear Spring Elementary School playground.
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve a donation in the amount of $8,124 to Clear Spring Elementary School from the Clear Spring Elementary PTA.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Any questions for Mr.?
I'll just say, tell them, thank you for what they're doing. I mean, that PTA works very hard up in Clear Spring, and it's nice to see that they support their school and their community by the donation, and that is a lot of money. So they did a good job. So I know some folks up that area. I don't know if they're all on that committee, but they talk about how they support their elementary school PTA, and so it's a good community. So.
And the school's excited. This is supporting their health and wellness initiatives too, to get the kids out playing more and
Absolutely.
active and involved in the playground.
It's expensive equipment.
Yeah.
It is.
It lasts a long time though.
Yeah, it does.
All right. All those in favor of the motion to approve the donation? Okay. 6-0. Student member concurs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Semler. Okay, that brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Williams, board members. Today, just a couple items. We do want to make sure that staff's aware, and we're going to be sending out a Connect 5 call tonight. But on this Friday, when staff receive their first check for the new fiscal year, there will be an adjustment for our insurance rate. The board's aware, I think staff in general is aware that our insurance costs this year unfortunately went up 25%, not only just the employee side, but also on the Board of Education side. So we'll be making communication with staff members so they're aware when they see their paycheck. Some people will not realize this change for another couple pays, just depending upon the nature of how their pay comes, whether it's a yearly, they're set up to receive their check on 26 pays, or whether they receive their check on 10-month pay. It'll be different for different groups of employees, but this week will be the first change to that. So we will be alerting staff to that this evening and directing them to a site where they can see when the effective change will take place. What I would call exciting news, I've had the opportunity to participate or at least visit, I won't say participate, but visit a lot of our professional development. The week before I went on vacation, we were underway with a lot of professional development opportunities, many of them driven by staff, particularly teachers, actively involved in developing our curriculum, developing our assessments, developing instructional strategies that will help our students. Today, I had the opportunity to spend some time with secondary social studies. They were working on some videos for staff that they could look at various techniques. I thought that was very creative. It looked like there was going to be more than a dozen of these videos available for almost self-professional development, on your own type professional development. The English Language Arts team was working on our Cornerstone task and other curriculum opportunities where they've had lots of different teachers involved in that. And a large group, probably 70 or 80 people involved in a cross-curricular English Language Arts, science, social studies lesson for elementary. They had a whole table of kindergarten, first grade, second grade teachers there. So very excited about a lot of our opportunities. Last week I had the opportunity to spend some time in one of our math PDs for elementary. Also today, middle school, our new math tech book. A whole team of teachers were there learning together. 6th, 7th, 8th grade and algebra teachers. Again, just working collaboratively to really prepare good things for other staff members that couldn't attend. One workshop I've had particular interest in, components of reading. There's a workshop last year, as I understand it, staff ran the workshop. We had 4 participants. This year, and I think I sent the board a little reminder of this, a little note of this, maybe last Friday. We had over 100 participants several weeks ago. As staff members started to attend the workshops, and I started receiving some of the evaluation feedback, it was just, I mean, over the top what people were describing. It's just an excellent, excellent workshop. As many of the other workshops have been, and some of the others I haven't read the evaluations, I'm anxious to read what teachers' perception of the workshops were at this point. But as I understand, I think the last number I heard was 276 elementary teachers have signed up, but I think that number's probably climbed in the last couple days. So I won't be surprised to see that top 300. And you know, I think roughly we have 600 elementary teachers. So almost half of our teachers would have participated in this workshop. So I want to thank our staff that's helped pull this together, to pull together an excellent workshop. But in particular, I want to thank our teachers that have taken their summertime to come in. It's a 2-day workshop, a 2-day commitment, and I just think it's going to have huge benefits for our students as we really try to address this need to get all of our students on grade level reading and beyond. So I think this is going to be a big, big step forward, particularly in our elementary grades. And again, I want to thank staff for designing the workshops, and again, I want to thank teachers for signing up for those workshops. And last today, had the opportunity to view a video. Some of the videos we're creating now, I know, 30 years ago we would have hired a whole team of people and spend tens of thousands of dollars to create videos. Now it's almost, I don't know, somebody's doing it on the fly on their phone or whatever. It's just amazing what our students can do, let alone our staff. But we have a video of trying to promote non-traditional students to sign up in some of our CTE programs. But I think it's a good promotion of our career and technology education programs. And Richard, if you're going to give me a little help, we'll cue that up and just share that with the board here for a few minutes. So I just thought it was a good video that shared a little bit of our non-traditional. In case you didn't recognize, that was Tech High and also the Frederick Street location. And we have one of our cooperating business partners that's going to help display the video for us. So we're pretty excited about that. And I want to thank Cody Pine and Dr. Pugh and others that have pulled together things like this. I mean, they do this regularly. So these aren't things that just happen to happen on rare occasion. These are things that are happening for our staff and our students pretty frequently. So I'm pretty proud of them. That's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. We'll move on to personnel action. Dr. Bishop.
And you were the executive producer, right? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Dr. Michael, Mrs. Williams, and Mr. Stauffer, and board members. As discussed earlier in closed session, there are several personnel actions for today for your review, and at this time, we'd like to request your approval for the personnel actions.
Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor of the personnel actions discussed earlier today? Okay, thank you. 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to reports to the board, and that is committee reports. Mr. Reiner, would you like to begin?
Yes, personnel, or HR, excuse me, HR will meet, tentatively, we're set to meet on the 25th of July. Not sure of the time yet.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisher?
Policy Committee will meet this Thursday, July 13th at 2 p.m. And since I'd been filling in for chair of CNI, the CNI had determined that they were not going to meet this month. They will be meeting in August.
Thank you. Mr. Gaspard?
Facilities Committee will probably meet in August. We do not have any more meetings this month, so a date will follow at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bickford isn't here to report on the Finance Committee. So, Mr. Diallo, did you have anything? Student government has not been meeting, so
Our student government is anticipating a meeting closer to when the school year starts.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is future agenda items. And with regard to future agenda items, in our agenda planning committee meeting today, we discussed the agenda for the board retreat that's coming up on August 8th. The first half of the morning will be led by Emily Hurd from MABE, and the topics will be team building, board norms, and communication processes, and some goal setting procedures. We'll have lunch, and then in the afternoon, one of the topics that we are anticipating is system goals, but I'm asking my colleagues to come up with some suggested topics that they would like to see us discuss, receive information from the superintendent and staff. You could email those to me so that we can firm up the agenda for that day. On August 15th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm hearing that the photographer is requesting 1 hour for our group photo session. So we'll be here at 2 o'clock on August 15th, and then our closed session will begin at 3:30 on the 15th. Coming up in September, we'll be looking at our capital improvement plan, and we have some other tentative topics, but again, I would ask that my colleagues let me know of reports that you would like to have made to the board on special areas of interest or special topics, things that you would like to be updated on, so that we can further refine our agendas for the upcoming meetings. So that's all I have with regard to future agenda items. And before we begin the last item on the agenda, which is board member comments, I would like to say how nice it is to have our new student member here. Mr. Diallo's term began July 1st, so this is his first official meeting. Welcome. We're happy to have you. I hope this is everything you thought it would be, this first meeting. It's great to have you. Do you have anything that you'd like to say comment-wise, other than it's great to be here?
Just looking forward to a good term.
Thank you. We're looking forward to having you with us at our meetings. Mrs. Murray, welcome. Do you have some comments this afternoon?
I do. Career and technical students from Washington County won one of the nation's highest awards at the 2017 Skills USA Championships, held June 21st and June 22nd in Louisville. Team SG, consisting of Carla Tellez, Derek Hanna, and Jacob Key from Washington County Technical High School in Hagerstown, was awarded a Skill Point Certificate in Career Pathways, Business, Management, and Technology. More than 6,000 students competed at the National Showcase of Career and Technical Education. And the Skills USA Championships is the largest skill competition in the world. So congratulations to that team.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. We'll jump here to Mr. Stauffer.
I have none.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Mr. Gessford.
Nothing.
Mrs. Fisher.
The only thing I have is actually a small suggestion to add to the retreat,
Okay.
a refresher on Robert's rules, especially for new members.
Okay. Thank you. Noted. Mr. Ridenour.
Nothing at this time.
Nothing at this time? Okay. For my comments, I would just like to remind members of something that you received in your packet, and that's information about the upcoming MAVE conference. As a member of the conference planning committee, I know a lot of thought went into the sessions and the workshops and who our featured speakers, our keynote speakers would be. It's always a great opportunity to learn and to grow, and I would encourage you to give consideration to attending. It's the first week in October, October 4th through the 6th, and I know Ms. Chekovic would be happy to help you with making your reservation to be able to attend. And I know, Mrs. Murray, you have an orientation coming up at MAVE
August 14th.
in August, and Mr. Diallo, you have one as well coming
August
up
10th.
August 10th. So lots of opportunity to learn and grow. So, okay. If that's all, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.